I wanted to share a little bit more about Step 9, just a couple more of experiences, and then I'll give it back to Malcom, and we can maybe hear some more from you guys, and maybe wrap it up for tonight. Give you a chance to have some social time. I think that's important. We'll leave it up to you. One of the things that's been interesting for me in my journey here is I did most of my amends shortly after I did my work, and then a few came up here and there, and then for a long stretch, probably over 10 years, there was nothing left. I really couldn't think of any other amends to make. And then probably about 4 or 5 years ago, all of a sudden, there were some amends that popped up. And I believe that God made them apparent to me and showed me that I needed to make them. I'll share two of them. One's a little not lengthy, but take a few minutes to tell a story, and the other's pretty quick. Back in the 70s, I worked for a company. I was a photographer part-time, one of the many jobs that I did. And I became very friendly with the owner of the photography shop, and him and I did a lot of work together, and our wives became friends. We were young. I was probably 26, 27 years old at the time. They had their first son, and we didn't have any children yet, so we got the girls together and we went out, and we hit it off, and we became friendly, and we started to. I worked there on Saturdays and also on weekends. I was a wedding photographer, and on Saturdays, when I was in the shop, we would always talk and say, well, what are you doing tonight? And so for a couple, 3 years, we ended up, we went out almost every Saturday night. We were very close to these people. And they were actually godparents to John, my son. And so some time went by, and one day I said to the gentleman, so what are we going to do tonight? And he said, he said, we can't make it tonight. I said, why not? And he said, my wife is upset at Debbie. And I said, what's she upset about? He said, I don't know, Dick, it's woman stuff, and so I went home and told Debbie, and she got upset, and she went down and she confronted her. She wanted to know what had happened. And the person basically, she minimizes. She says, "Oh, it's nothing," and so Debbie thought everything was fine. The next weekend comes around, and I said to him, "What are we going to do this weekend?" And he says, "We can't get together." He said, "My wife is still upset." And I'm racking my brain trying to figure out what happened here. It was one of those situations in life. I went home and talked to Deb. She didn't know, and I couldn't see anything. And so the divide grew, and this woman wouldn't even speak to me. And I formed a huge resentment. And to be honest, I never inventoried it. A lot of time went by, and I never really gave it much thought. Our friendship, the gentleman and I, stayed intact, although we obviously couldn't be as close because we lost that bond between the two couples. And it hurt terribly. I love this guy, and I still love him, and we're still friends. So flash forward 15 or so years, and all of a sudden one day, this deal pops into my mind. And it becomes crystal clear to me what happened. And I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it in the midst of my, this was early in the game too. I mean, I was daily drinking, but I mean, it was more about my behavior. Here's what happened. It became crystal clear to me. This guy, I loved this guy so much that I smothered him. And how that looked was at every turn I was there. I was pretty handy with my hands, and he had an old house, and he needed wiring done. Bang, I was there. His wife was going in to have her wisdom teeth done, and I knew everybody at Framingham Union because I used to work in the OR, so I made sure she got special treatment. Bang, I was there. She's laying on the gurney. Bang, I'm there. I was everywhere. I thought it was great. I really, really thought I was helping these people. And it became crystal clear to me that what happened was that the only way that she could get me out of her life and get her husband back was to blow up that relationship. So I knew I had to make an amends to her. And I happened to be down there at the shop. I would only see him once a year or so. Life changes and we all move on to different things. And this one night, it was just him and I. And he said to me, Dick, he said, you're one of my dearest friends. And he said, if I ever needed anything, if anything bad ever happened in my life, you'd be the first person that I would think of to call. And I saw my opportunity. So I said, well, I've got something to tell you, and it's about your wife. And I didn't present that quite right. And I really didn't do that intentionally, obviously, but I saw the look in his eye, and I said, I got to hurry this up here and explain. So I walked him through what I just walked you guys through. And he said to me, I said, I'd like to make an amends to her. And he knows who I am and what I am. And I said, but I said, I'm not trying to get anything here. I want you to understand that my real reason here is to see if I can free her up. And if I can't free her up, then there's no need to do it. And I want you to understand that I'm not trying to regain the friendship or try to get back to where we were or anything else. And he said to me, okay, Dick, he said, we're going on a cruise. I don't want to bring this up tonight. He said, when I get back, I'll talk about it, and we'll see where it goes. And I never heard anything from him again. And I've seen him. I see him not often, but I see him every 6 months or so. I love seeing him and catching up with him. And I know he loves me. But what I do know is that the amends, it wasn't right. And I don't know whether he ever got to her with it. He may have just thought, well, you know what? It's not worth bringing this up because it's been almost 30 years, and it's just not worth it. But that's an example to me of how I got to put the idea of the amends out there, and then let God take care of the rest. I didn't have to force it. But it's just amazing to me that I could go almost 25, 26 years out from the actual event and never have thought about it, and all of a sudden become crystal clear about what the motivation is, and that proves to me that God is at work in my life, and that He's going to constantly open up things to me when I'm ready to see truth. I had another one that's much quicker story. I had this. Facebook is a seeding ground for amends. We can find people now that we can never find. And this particular gentleman and his wife were friends with us at about the same time period. And this is the same thing. All of a sudden he popped up. He'd been on my mind off and on for years, but he popped up into my mind, and another truth became completely clear to me. And this is what this looked like. It was much the same idea, except almost in the opposite. The truth was that in my grandiosity, not my drinking, my grandiosity, these people had to go away. We had two couples as friends. And they got sick and goddamn tired of listening to how great I was doing and how successful I was and how big my ego was. And they had to go too. They just took themselves out. See, I chalked it up to, people grow apart and people grow and things change in life and all that kind of stuff. And that wasn't it at all. The truth came as clear as day to me. This is only a year and a half ago. So I got in touch with him. And I said, we had a boat at the time. I invited him up on the boat, him and his wife, and they accepted. So I got him up on top of the boat, and we sat there, just him and I, and I said, Peter, I know I've harmed you, and I know that I wasn't a good friend. And I said, I know I was hard to be around, and I want to set the record straight. What can I do to make it all right? You know what he said to me? He said, Dick, just be my friend. Just be the friend that I always wanted. And he said, let's start here and work forward. And so after 30 years, we've got a brand new relationship. Those are some examples of, how amends go and don't go as we think they would. And but God's always at work in the amends process, and all I have to do is be open-minded and open, spiritually open, and those things are going to come to me without any work on my part.
Every once in a while I hear a story like Dick just shared. And it just absolutely amazes me how we, as broken alcoholics, go and we share something that has deeply affected us, and some of our foibles, so to speak, and we wear them out on our arm. And a well person looks at us and says, "It's no big deal. It's no big deal." And it probably was no big deal to them. And let's go forward from here. That sounds like a well person. It sounds like a person that probably wasn't an alcoholic, that could probably look at Dick and understand what he was and where he was and what went on, and knew it a long time ago, probably. Maybe I'm putting words in Dick's mouth and in his mouth. But it is amazing. It is absolutely amazing to watch well people and how they process resentment and how they come to terms with what they're responsible for in a resentment, and they make amends. And they did this all in 24 hours. So they're free from the resentment. They've made their amend, and it's all done. It's all over. And it's just so foreign to me, and so foreign to us alcoholics. This inventory process has allowed me to take a kindly, tolerant view of each and every one, and to look at somebody as a human being now. And what a gift! What an incredible gift! That I don't have to be right. I don't have to be the boss. I don't have to be in charge. And I don't have to go into every situation knowing how to fix it. And I don't have to go into every situation and have the answer. And God, what a gift. Let me talk a little bit about two other areas of amends and we'll move on. One of the things that Dick touched upon in his first story there is permission. Is permission. If this is about you, and my effort to make an amend is truly about you, I need your permission to make that amend. I need to go to you with my hat in hand and share with you what it is that I'm trying to do. And I need to get your permission to do that. It needs to be okay. And it needs to be perfectly okay if you say to me, I don't want to hear it. As Brenda told the story. Where's Brenda? Brenda told the story that, this woman in the supermarket aisle, had forgiven her and didn't want anything to do with her and didn't want her in my life. And that has to be okay. It has to be okay. We've made our effort. We've cleaned up our side of the street. We were prepared and willing to do whatever was necessary to set right that wrong. Particularly in old relationships and extended family situations. I need to approach that amend and ask permission to make it. With ex-wives and ex-girlfriends, it is absolutely not okay for me to insert myself into their lives and assume that what I think and what I want to do and what I'm trying to accomplish is important to them. So when I make that effort, I might need to go through a third party. I might need to ask permission, and I need to present this in a manner that cannot possibly cause harm. Cannot possibly cause harm. And then I need to get permission and proceed as carefully as I can. You know, my two ex-wives, I've never made amends to my first ex-wife. I've made one attempt to do so. My second ex-wife, I made amends to. And you got to mind you here, I got sober in 1983. My second ex-wife and I had a child in 1985. And she left me in 1987. And I made amends to this woman at my daughter's graduation from college. I made amends to her at my daughter's graduation from college. And I got to tell you, I am not a very good parent. And I have come to terms with that and learned that and made amends to my children and my stepchildren. And I watched the love of my life, this beautiful young girl grow up into an awesome young lady. And it'll probably bring tears to my eyes, but she went on through high school, through the school system in Walpole and then in Sharon. And as a freshman in high school, she got involved in drama club, and she didn't want to sing, and she had an interest in fashion, so she got involved with costume design and set direction and directing in drama club. And it shaped the future of her life. And she had awesome encouragement from her mother. And her mother did just an incredibly great job of raising this child. And she went on to California Institute of the Arts in Valencia, California, and she became a successful costume designer. And she lives in Brooklyn. And once again, she's the love of my life. Let me collect myself. I'm not supposed to get emotional up there. At her graduation from college, her mother was there, her grandmother on that side was there, and I flew out to Valencia for her graduation. And sitting in the stands watching her get her diploma, I was able to talk to her mother. Forgive me for a moment. She lives in Brooklyn now, and as I said, she's a very successful costume designer. And her mother turned to me and said, you know, you did an awesome job with her as well. And I knew, and I know that that's not the case. That's not the case. And she almost died a couple of years ago from lupus. And I probably should stop talking about this. But she almost died a couple of years ago from lupus. She had an event of kidney nephritis, and her kidneys stopped functioning, and her immune system stopped functioning. She has lupus, and it was a product of getting some immunizations to go shoot a picture in the interior of Peru. And the immunizations triggered a immune response in her body, and her lupus acted up, and her kidneys stopped functioning. And her mother and I were down in New York and spent weeks with her in her recovery. And I can't tell you what a great gift it is from God to be able to be there, to be able to be a part of her life, and to be able to grow with her. And I didn't mean to get involved in this whole story, but she touches my life deeply every day. She just finished a run being a costume designer and assistant costume designer on the television show Are You There Yet? And she is taking some time off right now and lining up her next gig. But it's incredible to watch somebody who's well and watch some great success in life. She's only 26 years old, and she makes a lot of money, and she has a lot of fun, and she really enjoys life. And I went down to New York to help her move into a new apartment in Brooklyn 4 or 5 weeks ago. And she's just incredibly well, beautiful young lady. What I wanted to talk about before I get off on a tangent here was Graveyard Amends and the Spirit. I spoke at the Fellowship of the Spirit in Colorado a number of years ago, and I spoke in the workshop on amends. And the Friday night speaker was a woman from Minnesota, really, really well-known woman, an Al-Anon. And she spoke on Friday night, and on Saturday morning we had the workshop on amends, and I spoke about amends, and I shared much of what I've talked to you about the amends being about you, and about me giving you back what it is you need, and what it is that I took from you. And she shared this story the next day, and she shared this story of a graveyard amends with her husband, who had died from this disease, and her husband who had died in walking the camp in the medication and mental health camp and 1 foot in the spiritual camp, and he committed suicide because he couldn't get into the spiritual camp and couldn't get into the mental health camp, and neither one was working anymore, and he committed suicide. And the graveyard amend wasn't with the husband, but the anger that she had towards many of us alcoholics was palpable. And she had a graveyard amend with her father, and talked about this powerful experience of being freed from her anger toward him at the graveyard. And she got on me a little bit when she spoke. And I got to tell you, I don't think we entirely understand the Spirit and where it takes us, and what it does to us, and how it touches us. And when we go to a grave and we talk to somebody and we share and pour out our heart about our amends with them at the grave, I don't know that they don't hear that. I don't know that they don't reach down and touch our heart and help us heal. And I don't know that they don't heal. So if you've lost somebody, if you have somebody you need to see, you need to talk to, maybe you can write a letter, maybe you can do the graveside amend, but don't presume that they won't hear you. Don't presume that they won't hear you. Thanks.
We've been going a while. I'm going to give you guys the choice here. It's 20 to 10. We've been at this, quite a while. What would you think? We're really done with the amends, at least I am. And maybe we give you guys the opportunity to have some social time, which is so precious and so little in these things. What do you think about that? Okay. All right. Well, we'll wind it up for tonight. Again, 9:30 tomorrow here. We can get some help to get set up for the meeting before we adjourn and do whatever we're going to do, and we'll see you in the morning. And Malcolm and I both thank you for putting up with us for the whole day. It wasn't as planned, but we had a great time, and I hope you had a good experience too. Thanks.
Amends last night. Powerful and moving. Hope you all forgive me for falling apart a little bit. wanted to talk a bit about 10, 11, 12. Maintenance of this spiritual experience that we've had as the result of this step. In many respects, we've commenced with step 10 and sometimes step 11 as we've moved along through this process. And I'm going to hand the mic to Jerry because it's a wee bit intimidating to be sitting here beside him.
I kind of think that it's the other way around. I've listened to these guys, and it's a little bit intimidating to sit up here with them. This is the first thing, this thing we call AA and living a spiritual life, is the first thing I've ever started and stuck with. I am by my very nature a quitter. If it gets too tough, I quit. If it gets too hard, I quit. And, I told you the story last night about when I was writing my first fourth step, and I was just struggling with it, and I told my son, as I was trying to write it, I said, I'm through, I quit. And he says, why are you quitting, Dad? And I says, because this doesn't work. And that's when he said, how do you know it doesn't work? You haven't finished. And, he was 15 years old, and I was 47 years old, and he knew just intuitively that you cannot draw a conclusion that something doesn't work if you haven't finished it. How many of you here have children? Oh, great, because you'll understand some of what I'm going to share with you, and we're going to talk about step 10 here just momentarily, but my son was telling me a story one day about he was a pretty good little high school athlete. Now, this is a small town America, so you don't have to be real good to be outstanding. But I think, of course, he's my son, so I think he is outstanding. And anyway, he played the position of catcher in baseball all of his time, from the time he was a little kid up until he was 17, 18 years old. And one day the coach, they were having a particularly tough time, and the coach called timeout, and they'd gone through all their pitchers, and so the coach came out and said to my son Jerry, his name's Jerry also, said, Jerry, can you go in and can you pitch for a little while, just till we can get this game over? And my son said, sure. And so he began pitching, and had some success as a pitcher. But at the end of the first inning, after the coach watched him, he said, Jerry, he said, you're hell on form, but you sure are effective. And so my son came home, and when he was telling me that story, he said, Dad, he said, don't you think that substance always is more important than form? And I said, no, you got to look good above all else. And my whole life, up until I began doing this, it was based on just what I looked like. And what I looked like is a fraud. To me, I know that today. Because that's what it was. I was just a complete fraud. You never knew who I was. And I was talking to somebody else this morning back here, and we were having a grand time. And we live a life that's not based in reality. Everything is up here in our head, and I remember as a small child, I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I began to try to figure this thing out. Now, do you remember those days when you're just trying to figure it all out? And the game goes something like this: what is it you want me to be? And so then you do your level best to become whatever it is they want you to be. And so we're never who we are. We are whatever is going on in our head says this is what those folks want, so let's give them what they want. And when you live in that form, the spirit begins to die. The spirit cannot live in an environment like that. The spirit has to be whatever the spirit is. I mean, we're all here for a purpose. We're all here for a purpose. And you can't fulfill my purpose, and I can't fulfill yours. So I have to be what the Spirit wants me to be, and you must be what the Spirit wants you to be. And if we don't find that, we live a life of deep and painful conflict. And the only way I could subdue that pain enough to just get by was to take a drink. See, I've heard people talk about alcoholics, and they talk about we're chasing pleasure. And I believe at the very depth of my soul that once I took the first drink, I was never seeking pleasure again. I was trying to escape pain. And so that's a part of my illness. I have pain, and I found a medication that would fix that. And my problem is, though, is that my illness is always racing along at a speed that is just slightly greater than the amount of medication I can take. So I can kind of get the pain to kind of be subdued for a little bit, and then the pain is greater. Now I got to have more medicine. And in those days, I'm talking about booze. I don't think anybody here started out drinking a quart of scotch a day, did you? No. Well, and I heard somebody giggle, and I thought, that's what we would do if somebody said they were drinking a quart a day. We kind of giggle. Who in the hell would drink that much booze every day? Well, I can tell you, I can raise my hand because I got there. And it didn't take a terribly long time. I remember the first time that I finished a quart of bourbon in one day, and I thought, how in the world did this happen? How in the world did it happen? Anybody identify with coming up toward a Saturday night? I don't know, where I grew up in Kansas, and had the end of my drinking career occurred in Kansas, and the liquor stores closed, I believe, at 10 o'clock on Saturday night. And I remember when I would go to the liquor store on Friday night, and I'd buy all the booze I could get in a cardboard box, and I would take that home, and I'd tell the liquor store owner I'm going to have a party at the house. I didn't want anybody to think I was drinking that much. See, isn't that the game we play? We have this goofy thing. We don't want anybody to know the truth about us. I'm not even sure that I wanted to know the truth in those days, but that's probably another story. But you buy that booze and you go home, and you get close to 10 o'clock on Saturday night, and you realize you're just about out already. And Sunday, the liquor stores are going to be closed, and that's a time to panic. I mean, I don't care what the weather's like outside. If I see that I'm coming to the end of my supply, I'm going to take off to the liquor store. I remember one time my wife, and it wasn't Gail, I was married to a different lady then, and she said, "You're going to go where?" It was the reason she asked me, like I was an insane man, is because there was a bad snowstorm outside. Now listen to this story. If you want to know how I told you how insane it was. It was a terrible blizzard outside. The wind was blowing, someplace between 35 and 40 miles an hour, snowing fiercely. And I started out of the house. She didn't want me to go, but I had to, and I said, "I'll be right back." And I went and got in the car, and by this time I'm pretty well known in this small town as a drunk. And so I decided that, I don't want to go to the local liquor store because they know me there. So I'm going to drive to another town 16 miles away in a blizzard. But that's more important to me than letting the local guy know that I'm back into his store again. Now, I remember I never one time questioned whether or not I was nuts. Today I look at that and I think, if anybody told me they were doing that, I'd say, "Gee, many gods, you're crazy." So I have had to ask myself over the years, were you insane, Jerry? And I was. You know what really captured me and got my attention to follow what we do in this book? It started with the very first line out of the first forward to the first edition. It said, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are over 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." And when old Don said that, that was written by Bill. And Bill came from right here, of course. And he wrote that line in such beautiful English prose that I needed it translated into something that I could understand. My sponsor said, I've got a mind that doesn't work right and a body that won't die. And that's what Bill said in his most eloquent way. Got a mind that doesn't work right and a body that won't die. And the only problem with that is we don't know it. See, we're busy from the time we're just small kids. I believe, and I'll get back to step 10 here momentarily. I believe, well, that's not a complete promise, but that's at least try to fool you. I'll try to fool you into believing that's what I'm going to do. I believe that I was born an alcoholic. I really don't have it. There's no question in my mind. That doesn't mean that you have to believe that. But and again, I told you that one of the things that is necessary for a spiritual life is that we understand the truth about ourselves. We come to terms with the truth about ourselves. And from the time I'm old enough to remember, I really was trying to figure out what do these big people want from me. And I did my level best to do that. I remember as I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I'd gone to my grandparents one weekend, and my mother always wanted me to go to Sunday school and church. I grew up in that kind of an environment, and so she got me all ready on Sunday morning to do this, and she set me out they lived out in the country. My grandparents did. And that's where we were for the weekend. And so she told me to go out on the front porch and sit there until it was time to go to church. And so I went out there and I sat on the steps, and she said, don't go anywhere. But I tell you what, I'm sitting on the steps and I'm looking down about a quarter of a mile from the house is the river. And now all little boys just love water, and they love rivers and anything it looks like. So I'm thinking, nobody will miss me for a few minutes. So I decided I'll head off down there. And to get there, you had to go either over or through a barbed wire fence. So I was too small in those days, so I decided I'd go through. And as I got through, and I almost made it all the way, and one of the barbs on the fence caught my shirt, and I heard it tear. And I pulled it around to the front of me, and I looked, and there was about a 2-inch tear on, half of a square. It was just a flap. So I did what all good little drunks in the making do. I went back to the house, and I sat with my back to the wall. And I sat with my back to the wall and got in and got to church, got out of I got out of the car, somehow managed to keep anybody from seeing my back. I don't know how I did it, but anyway, I got there and came back home after church, got that shirt off as quickly as I could and got it into the dirty clothes. And we went home after the weekend, and a couple of days later, my mother said, son, did you know your shirt had a tear in it? And I says, no. She says, well, don't you know how that happened? And I said, I don't have any idea. I don't know what, I imagined that the punishment was going to be, would have been close to being thrown into the gates of hell, I guess. I don't know. But I had to be what people wanted me to be. And so I look back on all those experiences, and I just piled one on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, until I ended up here. I took a drink, and all of a sudden, everything was okay. And I got to the point where I had the drink to get up, stay up, ate lunch, go to bed, and stay in bed. So my life was a constant cycle of just drink to drink to drink to drink to drink. Come in here, and 13 years go by, and I realize that something is drastically wrong, because all the insanity and the fears that are associated with this illness, if you don't do something about it, had caught up with me. and I hear this guy say, I have an illness, a mind that doesn't work right and a body that won't die, and I'm thinking whatever this guy has discovered is what I want. So I begin to do what he does. And one thing led to another, and I made the little journey through the steps. I didn't do it beautifully. There was nothing eloquent about my first trip through the process. But I finally got to step 10, and like I say, I'm a natural-born quitter. And what I discovered, even after all that inventory, was that I have a mind and an ego that wants to always resurrect itself from the dead. It just will. I'll find myself telling somebody something that isn't true, and it's already out of my mouth before I even know it. You ever done that? You ever get to work, just 5 minutes late, and all the way that and you know you're going to be late. Do you hear your mind starting to automatically come up with stories? One of the kids got sick, had a flat tire, car trouble. There was a terrible accident out on the interstate. I mean, all of the various stories. And then, of course, you have to weed them out because some of them you may have just used recently. God, how much easier would it be if you just say, boss, I'm late. It's a bad practice that I have. I've always I never plan very well, and I just wait till the last minute to get started. But I tell you what, I'm going to try to do better, and if I can, I will. And then what we do is we 10-step that by letting somebody know. Because I never did that. I always told the story. I kind of got ahead of myself there. I always that's what I should have done. I should have said, boss, I didn't do very good here. I promise you I'm going to try to do better. But I didn't. I'd tell them the lie, and then I'd have to go back and sit down and look at that and tell somebody that, once again, I was in fear about something. And so I took the coward's way out. Most of us guys grow up wanting to be tough and a lot of machismo about ourselves, and we're not. We're anything but macho. I love to say it that way. I'm a macho man. You betcha you are, Elkins. You're just that goofy. Lord. But I've had to understand that my alcoholic mind will come back, and I'll catch myself. And that's the first place that I always catch myself is dishonesty. Dishonesty pops up so quickly. See, I'm born to that. I'm a born liar. I really am a born liar, born quitter, born loser. You name it, and I'm all those things. So I hear myself. I hear the lie get out here before I can stop it back here. So I have to clean that up. I just had a meeting last week with the board of directors at the place where I work. And I said something. It wasn't a lie, but it was wrong. It was wrong. And I heard then one of the directors say something. I thought, he's right, and what I said was wrong. And so I just stopped the meeting. I said, Bill, you're absolutely right, and I was wrong. And the chairman of the board looked up at me, and he started laughing. He said, I never hear that around this table. Never hear that around this table. And I could tell that he enjoyed that. It had nothing to do with Jerry. It's just that it's fun once in a while to hear somebody say, it's refreshing. You're right, and I'm wrong. A lot of my amends took that form, so that wasn't something that came to me naturally. It came to me as a result of practicing what we do. And so as I move into the 10th step, I've begun to understand how important it is for me to constantly be alert for fear and anger and dishonesty. I have to. And underneath all of that is some form of selfishness and self-seeking. It just pops up. I'm selfish when I'm trying to hold on to something that I think I have. I have this image that I've built up, and I want everybody to think that's who I am. I'm trying to hold on to that. That's my selfishness. Self-seeking is I'm trying to prove to somebody I'm really better than I am. I'm trying to get something. We know what fear and dishonesty and anger are. And so when I see those things, I have to clean that up as quickly as I can. Now, don't let me leave you with the impression that because I'm such a giant, that I do this immediately. Sometimes I live with it until it becomes so uncomfortable. Then I have to go back and do something about it. But I've learned over the time. This spiritual path we're all embarking upon gets narrower. I'm sure these guys have already talked to you about that. It gets narrower and narrower and narrower. The parameters on how I can operate out there and get off the spiritual path onto that little bumpy part called dishonesty and fear and anger. I can't get over in that part of the road anymore. And this gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And you know, one of the reasons that I would love to say I do this for some grandiose reason. The truth of the matter is, once you embark upon spiritual life, you're going to suddenly discover that this is what you've been looking for from the time you were a small child. You know, I'm spiritually today at rest, right here this morning with you all, here and now, and that's all that ever counts is here, in this place, and now at that moment. Nothing else counts. If my mind is off thinking about, well, I wonder if I can make that deal close on Monday, then I'll have some money and maybe I can retire early. And for me, if I retired today, it still wouldn't be early. I missed the early boat. But I tell you what, I've learned that I need to do this because I enjoy the spiritual cleanliness, if you want to call it that. I can't always put the right words to what I want to say to you all. And again, the idea that any of us are spiritually perfect is such a misconception. None of us will ever reach there. And it took me a while to finally get to that understanding that I am not going to be spiritually perfect. I'm in my human condition, whether I like it or not. I remember the first time I heard my sponsor say I'm a spiritual being existing in a human condition. Spiritual being having a human experience. And you know, that still makes sense to me today, and I think the first time I heard him say that was nearly 15, 16 years ago. Maybe not that long, 10 years ago. Whenever. But I heard him say that, and I knew immediately that I had heard, for me, a spiritual truth. I am a spiritual being having a human experience. That being the case, then I must live by spiritual principles. It's not a question of, is this a good choice or a bad choice or kind of a mediocre. I must live by spiritual principles or I'm going to die. Now I'm going to die a long, slow, ugly, painful death. Do you remember the last days you were drinking when you couldn't even drink the pain away anymore? No matter how much you drank, it was not enough. Yeah. Or when you drank and you thought nobody. I mean, I remember I would drink to the point where I used to say I would go to bed. I think I passed out. That's what I did. And you wake up a couple hours later and immediately need a drink again. I don't know how many of you reached that point. I did. And yet I was still trying to deny to myself that I'm an alcoholic. I'm a guy that went through this whole dishonesty routine. I really wanted you to believe that I was okay because I wanted to believe that somehow I could manage this, for God's sakes. Just leave me alone and I'll figure this out. Well, I figured it out. And most of that figuring out falls into this category of step 10. I've got to keep my life as clean as possible. I don't do it perfectly. I will never do it perfectly. And like I say, I'm in my human condition, and I'm going to over and over and over again fall short. But there's a solution. There is a solution for that, and it's called Step 10 is what we're talking about right now. Somebody in my life needs to know the truth about me. I have, I went for a number of years after Don died without a sponsor. And bless a couple of old-timers' hearts. One's got 42 years sobriety, and the other one has 38 years sobriety. And they both began to call me. And finally, 3 years went by, and one of them said to me, it was a lady, by the way. She's so cool. She said, Jer, and she never has called me Jerry. She's always called me Jer, and she said, Jer, my sponsor's getting so old that she can't sponsor me anymore. She just can't. The lady is old enough that she knew Bill personally. And her name was Ellie, and she's just a beautiful lady. And anyway, this lady talking to me, she said, I don't think I can use Ellie anymore. How about if I sponsor you and you sponsor me? And I said, well, what's this going to look like? She said, well, I just need somebody to be accountable to. And I said, that sounds pretty good to me. I need somebody that I am comfortable with, that I can be completely accountable. I can tell her anything, and usually she's so cool. Usually she starts laughing. She's a terrific lady, in the same way with the guy that's got 48 years sobriety. The lady and I are going to do a workshop together here come June over in Pennsylvania, and I look forward to doing that so much with her. But I'm taking away too much time, Malcolm. I didn't mean to do this. But as you can tell, I am deeply enthusiastic about what it is we do. And one of the things that creates a great joy for a guy like me is we came out here in 1992. By 1993, we began to know some of these folks. And listen, I'm going to tell you something about New England people. They are not standoffish. They are not cold and reserved. This is the most family-oriented part of the country I've ever been in. And once they pull you into their family, man, you're set for life. Isn't that the truth? Yeah, you bet it is. And man, we were out here and we went places for Christmas and for Thanksgiving that, it wasn't our blood family, but we were certainly included as though they were. And what's made that possible is that I have a means whereby I can keep my life clean. And if my life is clean, spiritually clean, I don't find it necessary to take a drink. See, that's the thing I want to leave with you at this point, is that all the drinking I did, every drink I ever took, was necessary. Absolutely necessary. First one was I had lived a life that had just gotten taken so long that I was just and so much apart from everybody that was around me. I took the first drink I ever took, and all of a sudden, man, I was a part of everything. It broke down all of those barriers that kept me apart from you. All of a sudden, now I'm a part of. And, of course, that broke down, didn't work anymore, and so I had to find some other solution, and here it is. And now I'm just talking about how do we continue living in that solution and not quitting. And the only way I can talk to you all this morning like this, I didn't even bother to shave this morning. I was going to wear a nice shirt, and I thought, well, hell, I'm not going to be up there doing anything, so go with this old flannel shirt. It's comfortable. And so here I am looking like Sluggo O'Reilly and having a grand time with you guys. But what makes that possible is I've got people in my life that I can say, hey, listen, here's what I was doing the other day, and here's what I did, and it doesn't look very good to me. Can I tell you about it? I tell them about it, and I say, is there any place you need to go make amends? Either there is or there isn't. And we go on down the road. It's a great way to live. Malcolm.
I've shared with you over this weekend that the only time that I am truly comfortable, 100% comfortable in my own skin, is when I sit and I talk with you, when I sit across the table from another alcoholic and I open this book and try to share my experience. It's a time when I can invite God into the equation, ask Him for His help and guidance, and ask Him to put the right words in my mouth. and help me to focus on your experience and where I need to go to give you some help and guidance. The rest of my life, my default mode is to tell you what you want to hear, is to look good, is to immediately, as Jerry talked about, come up with some story or some excuse to make myself look better. The words of step 10 and step 11 on the pages of the book are important. They're not long. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs to share with you exactly what the book says, because I think it typifies and codifies what it is we want to do and what it is we want to do. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Can I carry this into the rest of my life? Can I carry this into my work life? Can I carry this into my family life? Can I truly approach my spouse and my children free from selfishness, dishonesty, and fear? Can I truly look to help provide them for their needs? Can I truly put their needs beyond mine? I can ask God for help and guidance every day in doing that. I can watch for dishonesty and fear and selfishness. I can ask God to remove them when they crop up. If I'm connected, if I get up in the morning and I ask God for guidance, and I sit quietly with my cup of coffee, review my day, and look ahead, I can see the Spirit in you. I need His guidance, I need His strength, and I need to stay on this spiritual course. I need to stay on this spiritual course. As I said, my default mode is to tell you what you want to hear, to please you, to look better. My default mode is never to make you unhappy, to avoid confrontation, which often means avoiding what's right. Avoiding what's right. If I ask God for the guidance, maybe I can find a kinder, gentler road. Maybe I can invite Him into my life every day. Maybe He'll touch me, and I'll grow, and I'll change. You know, I didn't imagine Friday afternoon that I wouldn't have the opportunity to sit here and listen to this guy all weekend. And poor Dick and I panicked about 6:30, 7 o'clock on Friday afternoon. God put us in this seat. But it's been a wonderful journey, and I can't tell you that I'm not sort of honored to sit up here next to Jerry and to talk to you. But as I've shared with you over the course of this couple of days, you guys have been awesome and incredible in giving Dick and I some support and some guidance and some strength and encouragement. And I'm probably going to punt this microphone back to Jerry pretty quickly here, and he can talk a little bit about step 11. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do that now.
Okay. I was enjoying listening. Let me see your book. There's times, I remember many, many years ago, we were in the living room of my house down in Cumberland, Rhode Island. I say my house, Gail and I's place. And somebody asked Don a question, And by this time, he traveled probably 3 out of 4 weekends. He started doing that when he was only about 6 or 7 years sober, and by the time I knew him, he was in someplace in the mid-20 years of sobriety. So he'd been traveling for 15 years, 12 to 15 years, doing this and doing big book workshops. And somebody asked him a question in the living room of the house, and I remember he said, before I answer that, he said, let's go to the book and let's see what the book says, because I want to be sure that my answer squares with the big book. And I remember I was absolutely amazed. He didn't need to go to the book. He knew the book. I guarantee you, he knew the book. But as an act of humility, he said, let's see what the book says. And I've always remembered that, and it's been an important part of my sobriety, in that my mind, my alcoholic mind, because I have so much pride, I can take this book, and by playing with it a little bit, I can make it sound a whole lot better than the way they wrote it. But I know better than that. I mean, I know what my ego can do with that thought. I remember when it was a number of years back, 10, 12 years ago, they came out with a version of the big book that had the big book on one side of the page and the other side of the page was blank. So you could make notes and that sort of thing on the other side. And I thought, that'd be neat. And so I told Don, I says, Don, I kind of like those books. I kind of think it'd be nice to be able to have some place to write. He said, Elkins, he said, I wouldn't recommend that. And I said, why not? He said, inside of 2 months, you will have rewritten the whole big book. See, you need somebody who knows you. Who knows you. And with a strong spirit in themselves, and they pass that strong spirit to you, they can say with grace and humor things that I couldn't hear from anybody else. Elkins, if I were you, I wouldn't do that. That's not what we do. He said, one time I was doing a fifth step with him, and I remember it really was a unique. I was so angry with the guy. It was my ex-wife who I was angry at, so I did the inventory with him, and he said, "Well, how are you gonna? What kind of action are you going to take to clean that up?" I said, "I'm thinking about leaving the country." And he said to me, "Well, you can do that." And I knew the way he said that I couldn't do that. And so I said, "Don, I'm waiting for the other shoe to hit the floor." I said, "What's going on here?" He said, "Well, you can do that, but that's not what we do." And you know what my mind said inside of my head? Well, what do we do? Talk about petty. Here's a guy who had given a lot of his time to a jerk like me. And I'm thinking, well, what do we do? Fortunately, what came out of my mouth was, well, what do we do? Sounded a whole lot different than what you heard up here. We have a friend in our original group that said if there were a PA system inside my head, you would evacuate the area. That's our good friend Benny who says that so often. If there were a PA system inside my head, you would evacuate the area. I like that because that's appropriate. Let's see if we can find. Well, step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works. If we have the proper attitude and work at it, It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? I remember when I asked, my mind really does operate in strange ways. And over the years that I've been doing this, and because I had a very effective sponsor, I learned to, when I see a word and I don't quite know what it means, and I'm the type that will assign something to that word, a meaning to that word. It may be totally irrelevant and totally incorrect, but I'll assign some meaning to it that works for me. Well, that's not a real good way to do this. Rather, it's best to ask somebody who you respect their opinion and ask them, what do you think this means? Well, he said, constructively review the day means this. If you look at yourself and you see something that you wish you could have done better, many of us will wallow in morbid reflection. God, why did I do that again? That's all you can do when you're in this. You just sit there and think of it over and over and over again. Replay the day over and over and over. God, I wish I had done better. That's a morbid reflection. Constructive review of the day said, what did I do that I wish I could have done better? By the way, did I do anything right? Did I do anything right today? You know, all we have to do is talk about one or two things. You know, the day that I was able to tell the board of directors, you know, Bill was right and I'm wrong. That was something I could look at the end of the day that was constructive. And I could look at a couple of other things that day that I thought, God, I wish I'd handled that better. Wish I had, because I'm a guy that can shade the truth just enough that it's a lie. You ever thought about that? If it's not quite the truth, then what is it? It's a lie. And that's been a tough deal for me, because I am a master at just shading the truth just ever so slightly to the point where it's a lie. Constructively review the day. For me, that looks like this. Here's what I did wrong. I wish I could have done better. God, I tell you what, that was not like a guy that's been given what I've been given should be doing. And I promise you, tomorrow I'm going to try to do better. And if you'll help me, I'm sure it will come out better. And with that, I let go of it. There's no sense in examining it anymore. I was either selfish, self-centered, dishonest, afraid, resentful, whatever it is, angry, you know, doesn't make any difference. Whatever it is, then it's time to let go of it. It's time to let go of it. I'm willing to let go of old ideas. And, you know, this book talks about that. Many of us held on to our old ideas, and the result was nil. Holding on to my old ideas is nothing more than holding on to my old way of thinking. It took me a long time to figure that out. Simple as concept as that is, I held on to my old ideas. Hold on to my old way of thinking. So am I holding on to my old way of thinking, or am I willing to let go of that old idea? Look at it for just a little bit. If it's an old idea, say, okay, God, I'm through with that. It's not working that well anyway. It's all yours. Do whatever you want. Then I go over and I look at something that I did better than I've ever done in the past. And I thank God that I can do that today. No big deal, but I am so grateful anytime I live a life that's transparent. You know, I don't remember how many years ago I heard this. I think it was back when Bob White was around. Bob White was an old West Texas cowboy. Beautiful guy. He's long dead now, so I can use his name. But Bob said, I think my journey here for you all is to become transparent. So that what you see is what I am. Or the other better way of saying it, so what I am is transparent, and that's what you see. I think my journey is all about becoming transparent, and I believe that. I believe that, and that's part of what this is talking about. So anytime I've done something that I know, people can see, here's what old Jerry really is doing, here's what he's thinking, and he means precisely what he said. What a great joy that is. So I can look at that and thank God that I have a little bit of that in my life today. That's what this whole part of the 11th step is all about. So then let's go on down to say, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motive. And we especially pray for freedom from self-will. 2 or 3 lines on down further. You know, I wrestled with this for years and years and years. I kept thinking, couldn't I come up with something better than this? Couldn't I come up with something original? You know, hundreds of thousands of people, alcoholics, have recovered using this. And there are countless. Do you know our spiritual principles laid out in this book come from thousands of years of religious people and spiritual people? And I need to distinguish between religion and spirituality. They're 2 different things. But many religious leaders are also spiritual leaders, and let's give them credit for what they are. A lot of our ideas here come from Episcopal ministers and some Catholic priests, and little Jesuit priests have given us so much. But that is really a distillation of thousands of years of spiritual teachings come down to what we're doing right here. And so if that's the case, why am I all concerned about being original? I'm certainly not the most original drunk in the world. So why don't I just take what somebody has given to me and see how that works? And I've been doing that now for a long, long, long time. God, guide and direct my thinking. What's any better than that? When I wake up, I've had some fun with that. I don't know if it's fun or not. I've experimented with this a little bit. I will awaken, and when I'm fully conscious, I'll just see where things go. And in a short period of time, I think, wait a minute, this is too painful. I don't want to go there anymore. So I'll pause and I'll say, God, will you please guide and direct my thinking? Well, what I do that precedes that is I do what is known to me. It's real simple. I do a conscious surrender every day. I'm sure I've missed some days when I didn't consciously surrender Saturday morning. I was already surrendered. But I know the type individual I am, and I'm a guy that can take his life back over in a heartbeat, because I have done that. My first 13 years of sobriety are just Jerry taking over and over again, taking my life back and trying to manage things and manage my life and so on. And so I've discovered that maybe one of the best things that I can do every day, and the reason I do this every day is every day that I awaken without the need for a drink is another gift. And I don't mean to be sappy and all that crap, but I really mean it. I didn't do anything special to get here. Hell, I woke one day and I was just a broken and totally beaten guy, and somebody said, well, you're going to have to go to treatment. And I said, I'm not going to go to treatment, and I don't want to do treatment, because I knew if I went to treatment, they were going to make me stop drinking, and I couldn't do that. I was afraid. I was afraid of what life would be without alcohol. So I fought them as long as I could, and I finally went simply because I was tired. Just simply, they wore me out. The bastards will. If you just keep drinking out there, they'll just grind on you till you just can't take it anymore. And during that time, what they have 2 modes of operation. Either they're on your case all the time, and then they quit talking to you. And if I can't get somebody to fight with me, well, hell, this is not worth waking up. In those days. That's one of the most effective ways to work with a drunk. Just quit fighting with him. So anybody out here who's Al-Anon? My wife has an expression she heard an Al-Anon say one time when the drunk falls down in the middle of the living room floor. Well, what do? Step over him. Don't you love that? I do. I still like that. Just step over him. Because the one thing that an alkie can't stand is for you just to ignore him and step over him. For goodness sakes. Where was I, sweetheart? I take these little side ventures, and I'm having so much fun when I get out there, but then I can't find my way back. What were we talking about, Malcolm? Yeah. Conscious surrender. Thank you, sweetie, so much. one person in this whole room is listening. I'm pouring my heart out to you all, and I only get one person who listens. You are a dear. She's well. Or real sick, one or the other, because she's listening to me. Anyway, we'll let God decide that. I consciously surrender. I really, truly am. I'm a guy who can take his will back so easily. And so rather than even take a chance on that each day, I was talking about each day as a gift. I didn't do anything to deserve this. I remember the first time I was 13 and a half years sober. I was going through this process, and I'd gone off to have breakfast with my son, and we were out in Denver in those days, and as we were having breakfast, and I looked across the table at him, I thought, I haven't done anything to deserve the fun I'm having with this kid. By rights, I should be locked up or dead. I really mean that. There's nothing dramatic about that. No real sobby story with that. I'd driven so many miles drunk, and I've done so many things that somebody should have locked me up for. So the fact that I could sit there that morning and look at my son and have a good time with him, and we were just really having a lot of fun. And I thought, this whole thing has been a great gift to me, and I didn't do anything to deserve it. So when somebody comes to my door and they say, Jerry, I want to stop drinking, is there anything you could do to help me? Why would I not stop and be willing to give them my time, which isn't worth much anyway? Why wouldn't I give them my time? And a lot of times I'm tired. I really am. I'm at an age now where after I've worked all day, I don't have a whole lot left to give. And somebody calls me and I really don't want to talk. And sometimes I can't, so I don't. By the way, that's okay. If you can't talk and give them anything, if your tank is empty, you can't do anything, then don't harm them by trying to talk to them and not giving them anything except some old crankiness maybe, or some goofy thought that just dismisses them. Get them off the phone as quickly as possible. Wait for another day. God will have that person call you back, or somebody else will, or they'll go find somebody that's more effective than you are. But when I get to the point of where I just understand this thing, my whole life has been a gift to me. I did 13 years without this program, and when I was literally falling apart in the most spiritual pain I'd ever been in. Spiritual pain is nothing more than a terrible sense of loneliness and tremendous despair. And when I was at that spot, then this showed up right when I needed it. And I embarked on it as best I could. And didn't do it very well, didn't do it thoroughly, didn't do it completely, but I did the best I could with it, and it worked. I don't work it perfectly. It works perfectly. It works perfectly. So we went down the road, and I was sitting there looking at my son that morning, and I thought, I haven't done anything to deserve this. And when I looked at that boy across the table from me, I thought, I'm never going to ask him to do anything for me to love him. Whatever he is, I'm going to love 100% with no conditions. The Spirit loves me that way. Can I be any less? See, I've been awakened to that fact, so now I can't be any less. And if I'm less, then I need to pause and pray. And sometimes you can pray by just pausing and invoking the name of the Spirit. And it makes no difference what you refer to the Spirit as. Spirit of the universe, the Great Spirit. Our Native American friends, they knew that so well. The Spirit, the Great Spirits, they have the spirits